Once again, please join me in thanking Stephen Zarlengo. And my wife reminds me, although I did not need to be reminded, that Stephen Zarlengo was the one that actually brought Elizabeth and I together. So, Stephen, thank you. As the awards were being given out, and a few moments ago I had an opportunity to speak to James Gibbs Stewart and to receive a copy of his Fantopian book, I was reminded of some words said by the poet Robert Burns, who I learned about when I was a child because my mother taught me how to read, reading to me from the Scottish poets. And Burns said something that reflects on this moment, because sometimes when people such as those who have been honored tonight commit their lives to work without expecting recognition, they may not know really how much they're appreciated. And so, at the risk of slaughtering the Middle Scottish, I'll give it a try. When Burns wrote, "Oh, what some power the gift they gave us, to say ourselves as others say us. Oh, what some power God give us, to see ourselves as others see us." So, Charles, Ken, Dick, James, and Stephen, all of us see you as making a major contribution to this world through your work on economics, on monetary policy, on giving people a chance to have a broader vision of the potential of society, which can truly be dedicated to the people as opposed to just a few interests. So please, I would ask all of you again to join in salute to all of the people who have been honored tonight. And I would like to enlist all of you, because there are many people of note in this room tonight. I'd like to enlist all of you in a common effort to take these ideas, which are moving this effort forward, and to look for opportunities for us to inject these into the public realm. Because the ideas that are discussed here need not simply be theoretical. There are practical applications. And I certainly have always felt this powerful synergy that comes from getting together with groups like this. Something always comes up, always. And you know, each of you knows what I'm speaking of. Very interesting. As Elizabeth and I left some of the early afternoon discussions, and we had the gentleman who worked with Saul Alinsky here, and actually, I had read Saul Alinsky's writings as a young person, was inspired by them, and we had to leave for a moment, so I didn't have a chance to have a discussion to follow. But one of the things that was said reflected a view that, well, get ready to put in 20 years. Now, maybe I was hearing something just from myself, or maybe I was feeling it from the room. But I was thinking, we're not waiting. We don't come together with the idea of linear time, but we see time as an illusion, which then we, through our collective consciousness, we bring ourselves to create new conditions, like that. We walked out the door and we ran into a group of young people who were on a scavenger hunt, but it dealt with environmental issues. And one of them produced a card. And the card, random synergy. Walked out the door. One minute somebody's saying 20 years. The next minute somebody's saying random synergy. And you know what I like to think? I'd like to think that each one of us, at any moment, we're touching someone else's life. At any moment, you meet that person who transforms your life, and in that moment, there is a multiplier effect as we affect each other's lives. That's the way it works. I've seen this throughout a 40-year career in public life, and I can feel it here. Because just one day of being able to spend time with the people here, you can feel it. That's when we come together. It's, you know, Einstein wrote about it in terms of unified field theory. Jung talked about it with the collective unarticulated consciousness. We all have this sense of what's possible. And Stephen, your work, this incredible body of work that you put together on, you know, the lost science of, you know, monetary policy, really, has created such synergy, bringing so many of us together. So I wanted to mention that because I see this incredible potential for change, and I invite each of you to an opportunity. Let's work together to move these ideas along. We, you know, from this moment right here, right into the public discussion. That's what, you know, a single congressional seat offers the possibility of doing. And now, how did I come to you know, this approach? I want to take you back and tell you a story that kind of ties in themes of monetary policy and privilege and monopoly and some of the things that have penetrated the discussion here in the last couple of days. This year, 2006, is the 100th anniversary of the creation of the City of Cleveland's municipally owned electric system. Cleveland Muni Light, as it was called then, was the brainchild of a mayor by the name of Tom Johnson. Mayor Tom Johnson was an associate of, and dare I say a disciple of, Henry George. He followed his policies very carefully, and Tom Johnson was himself an inventor and a monopolist. He had a streetcar monopoly at one time. But he saw that monopolies were really frustrating the public good, so he began to take policies that would break up monopolies. And he once wrote, I'll paraphrase this, I believe in the public ownership of all municipal service utility facilities, of water systems, of parks, of schools, of electric systems, of transportation systems. Because if you do not own them, they will in time own you. They will rule your politics, corrupt your institutions, and finally destroy your liberties. This was Mayor Tom Johnson, and he wrote this 100 years ago. He was considered by Lincoln Steffens, who was an American journalist around the turn of the century, to be the best mayor of the best governed city in the United States. It was 100 years ago. He brought forth this idea of a municipal electric system that was to be used to provide power to the people of the city of Cleveland at a fraction of the cost of what people were paying for electricity from the privately owned power company. Tom Johnson, when he gave birth to the idea of Muni Light, was able to cut the cost of power in less than 1/2 for the people in the city on a per kilowatt hour basis. He saw municipal power as a development tool as well to help out businesses who were striving to get started. You know, at the beginning of the century, there were a lot of businesses, particularly manufacturing, who were started. Access to energy and electricity was a huge benefit to be able to grow business. So he saw it as a benefit to business. he saw it as a benefit to the city because the city of Cleveland was one of the first cities to have its own street lighting system, to have municipal facilities that were powered by electricity. It was a benefit to the city, but in particular, he saw public power as standing at the pinnacle of the expression of government service to the people. And that is that people could have control of their own destiny by having a power system they could call their own. The minute that he came up with this idea of the public power system, there was an attempt by the private power company through the state legislature to actually block the creation of the power system. They tried to change the Constitution of the state of Ohio to block it. Well, that failed. They tried to buy the city council to stop the creation of it. That failed. And so Tom Johnson's dream became a reality. And so it went forward into the future. Into the future. In 1970, the City of Cleveland's electric system began to have some difficulty. The City Council was not approving of repairs to the city's generators, which meant that the City of Cleveland would have to buy power from another entity to be able to sell the power back to their constituents. You don't need to have your own generators to operate a power system, but in this case, the City of Cleveland had generators. But the generators needed repairs. They weren't in good repair. They couldn't use the generators, so they had to buy the power. Who did they have to buy the power from? The Cleveland Electric Illuminated, the private power company. That's when it started to get interesting. There was a point at which the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company began to sharply increase the price of power to the city. And then, when the city tried to go outside of the area to buy power, no one else would sell it to them. And then, when the city was trapped basically to buy power from the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company, the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company operated the transfer of power on the Muni Light system in such a way that it created outages on the Muni system, and then the private power company would send their salesmen into the neighborhoods where Muni Light had the customers, and they'd ask people to sign up for the private power company because the public power company was having trouble working. So there was a history of an attempt by the private company to get a monopoly over the public company, to put it out of business, to try to force it to equalize the rates, to try to sabotage the approval of improvements with the city council, to engage in anti-competitive activity. And then when the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company went to build a nuclear power plant, they were subject to an antitrust review. And in that antitrust review, the Atomic Safety and Licensing Board came out and they said that Muni Light, that the private company tried to block Muni Light from being able to get power. The tripling of the cost of power was illegal. They conspired with other utilities to stop them from buying power from other places. They operated the transfer of emergency power in a way to cause an outage on the system. They charged, the Atomic Safety and Licensing Board charged that this private power company was in violation of numerous provisions of federal antitrust law. And that the only way that they then were going to get a license for a nuclear power plant was to stop violating the law, to sell the city power if the city asked for it, and basically to cease and desist with all the violations. I was a clerk of courts in the city of Cleveland at the time. The mayor of the city at that time decided that he was going to settle all matters of dispute between the city-owned electric system and the privately owned electric system by selling the public system to the private system, ending a 70-year existence of a publicly owned electric system. He was going to essentially capitulate to the monopolist's desire to take over the public company, which would have resulted in the people of Cleveland immediately experiencing a 25 to 30% increase in their electric rates. The minute that happened, I decided that I was going to run for mayor of Cleveland. I was 29 years old at the time that this incident began to break forward. And the city council had already agreed to sell the system. They passed legislation to sell the system. I was not in the council at the time, well, that's where I started my career, and it had already been sold. I called one of my top advisors, and I said, you know, this is wrong what they're doing. They shouldn't be selling the system. They're giving them a monopoly. They're going to raise the price of electricity. The city's going to pay higher taxes for street lighting. People are going to pay higher bills for electricity. Businesses won't have the access to cheap power. This is a disaster. And the guy that I work most closely with, he said, look, there's nothing you can do about it. It is a done deal. My gut told me it was wrong. My heart told me it was wrong. My head told me it was wrong. I went back to my home, sat at the top of the steps, and began to read the history of the formation of the Cleveland electric system. And I read a book called Cleveland, the Best Kept Secret by a writer by the name of George Condon, who's a brilliant essayist and writer. And he wrote about the formation of Muni Light and how Mayor Johnson fought to save it. And I was sitting at the top of the steps very late at night, and I swear I could hear a voice call to me from across the ages. I could hear the voice of Mayor Tom Johnson saying, don't let them sell this system. Everyone was telling me it was done. There was nothing to be done. I put down the book, and I sat there for a while, and I was thinking about it, and suddenly I could see an entire series of moves that could be taken that would change the outcome. And so I began to set them in motion, calling together groups of people, getting legal action ready, getting a referendum on the sale ready, and just one thing after another initiating these efforts to stop the sale of the municipal electric system. In sub-zero temperatures, hundreds of people went across the city in freezing rain and snow and got 30,000 signatures to stop the sale. I then ran for mayor of Cleveland on a promise that if elected, my first act in office would be to cancel the sale. I got elected mayor of Cleveland in 1977 on a pledge to save the municipal electric system. That's where the story begins. Because once I took office, this private utility company used its connections with the banking community to create a fiscal crisis for the city of Cleveland. The first thing they did was to try to force the city of Cleveland to immediately pay back a bill for electricity that the previous administration ran up, figuring they were going to cover the bill with the sale of the system itself. The next thing they did was to go into federal court and try to force the city to pay the bill and put liens on city equipment. The next thing they did is they sat down with their partners in the banking community. Now keep in mind, you look at most utilities. Utilities and banks are almost simultaneous. You've got to look at the banking relationships of utilities. This particular utility, the Cleveland Electric Limited Company, fully 2% of their common stock was held by one of the big banks, and another 2% was held by another one of the big banks in Cleveland. The deposits of the utility were in the largest bank in town. Their cash deposits, their pension funds were the largest bank in town. 4 members who sat on the board of directors of the utility also sat on the board of directors of the largest bank. On December 15th, 1978, the head of the largest bank in Cleveland came to me and he told me this. I remember, keep in mind now, 31 years old, built a career in politics, door to door. Folks weren't in politics. You know, I came from a background where I grew up in the city of Cleveland, the oldest of 7. My family never owned a home. We lived in 21 different places by the time I was 17, including a couple cars. So I didn't have the connections that most people had when they got into public life. But I knew one thing, that people put me in office to protect their public interest. So the head of the biggest bank in town came to me in a very small room, and he said, look, he said, we will offer you $50 million worth of new credit for the city. But you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to sell that municipal electric system to the, keep in mind, to the private utility in which the bank was a business partner. Now, I knew at that moment that my career was on the line. But I also knew that the people in the city had basically entrusted me with this responsibility. The city council once again had taken action and set the stage for a sale. All they needed was my signature. At midnight on December 15, 1978, that was the deadline where I had to sign or the sale, or the city was going to default, get this, on $15 million in notes that were due. They could have been rolled over on notes that were due on loans that I hadn't even taken out, were taken out by the previous administration. So I was given a choice. You know, either to defend the public interest and stand up for this electric system, and more than that, the people's right to have municipal ownership, and behind that, the right to self-determination, or to capitulate to a bank that basically was telling me they were going to have a credit strike against the city if I didn't go along with it. I want to tell you what I was thinking about the moment I made the decision on what to do. One of the apartments we lived in when I was a child, I remember my parents, late at night, sitting at this table, which was one of those old tables that had like a laminated top. If it chipped, it would be black underneath the white top. And I remember my folks sitting at that table paying utility bills. And they'd pay them with pennies. They'd just sort through the pennies. And I can remember the pennies dropping on the table. I could hear them. You could just hear the pennies dropping on the table. And I was thinking, there's a lot of people out there who have trouble making ends meet, for whom it matters if they're paying $50 a month or $70 a month for electricity, if they're paying $100 a month or $150 a month for electricity. But it really matters. And at the moment I was asked to make that decision, that's what I was thinking of. I was back in the kitchen. I was like 9 years old, and in one of the many apartments we lived in, and I was thinking of my parents counting the pennies. So I told this banker, whose bank at one time owned 1/3 of all of the wealth in Northern Ohio, Cleveland Trust Bank. It was the study of a Wright Patman House Banking Committee investigation years ago. I told this banker, I'm not going to sell it. No. Now, when you say no under those circumstances, you can say no softly. But that no can sound like the roaring of a million people. Because what happened next is that all of the machinery of the media came to bear, challenging why I wouldn't sell this electric system. The city of Cleveland became the only city in the history of the United States to go into default over this issue. 1978. The people in the city had no idea what was going on. And 1979, I lost the election. And I'd go into public gatherings occasionally, and people would yell at me, default, default. They had no idea what happened. Move the calendar forward to 1993, 15 years later. I was on a beach in Malibu. I was out of politics. I couldn't get elected to anything. I had tried for 15 years. I just couldn't win an election. People just thought young guy took over the city and messed it up like that. But something happened. In 1993, the city of Cleveland undertook the largest expansion of a municipal electric system in America. And when they did that, suddenly people started to say, wait a minute, there wouldn't be a system if some mayor years ago hadn't said no to the sale. And what had become a millstone at that point, suddenly everything changed. Suddenly people were saying, where's Dennis? Where'd he go? Hey, you were right. 1994, I ran for state senate. Was the only Democrat in Ohio elected in a Republican landslide year who beat an incumbent Republican. My sign, the name Kucinich was there, and behind my name was a light bulb with the rays coming on. Said because he was right. 2 years later, I ran for Congress. Behind my name was a light bulb. Said light up Congress. Won that election. Today, Unilight is providing cheaper electricity to more people in the city of Cleveland, and it's about to observe its 100th anniversary. Now, why do I tell you this story? Well, it isn't just for the purpose of self-congratulation. You know, I spent 15 years out of politics, out of elected office. But I tell you this because when you really know what the right thing is to do, time doesn't matter. When you know that, and some of us are called to do this, you have to put it all on the line. You have to be ready to do that. When you're ready to do that, when you're ready to put everything on the line, new circumstances are created. It may take a while, but there is kind of an inevitability of the triumph of the human spirit and of the triumph of what's... We cannot let others choose the circumstances of the exercise of our integrity. We have to live it every moment. But when you do that, there's power. Every person in this room at one time or another in your life, when you stand for monetary policy reform, whoa, that you're talking about something that has the ability to shake the pillars upon which, you know, this structure of money is built in a society. But it also, because we take this position, it also gives us the ability to change everything. That's why I can stand here and talk to you today. Because I found out the truth. The truth is you can take a stand. And if you're willing to do that, you come to a new condition where you create new possibilities, not just for yourself, but for others as well. What I did, others can do if they realize that it's possible to do it. That, you know, offices are temporary. No one holds an office forever. But the human heart is timeless. Integrity is timeless. When you stand for something, it inspires others to do the same thing. So this group here has such enormous potential. Don't ever doubt the ability of each person here to change the world. Each person here, with your integrity, with your understanding, with your insight, with your willingness to say what you think despite what others might say, this is what life is all about. So I wanted to share that story with you because it ties in all the themes of the undue influence of capital, of monopoly power, of the attempt to crush the public interest. But occasionally we get the chance to take a stand. And when we do, we could change it all. So I want to ask you for a few moments. I'm going to ask Elizabeth, did you want to add anything to, you know, this partnership that I am, that Elizabeth and I have put together here is something that enables me to do what I do in a even more powerful way than I've ever been able to do it in the past. But thank you. Because it's been said before, we don't do anything alone. We do nothing alone. And now you're all a part, we're all a part of each other's journey. Each of us is now a part of each other's journey. So let's move forward with indomitable courage, with a willingness to stand up and speak out, to, in the words of Shelley in Prometheus Unbound, to defy power which seems omnipotent. That's where there is joy and hope. So, Elizabeth, can I convince you to add anything?
Hi everyone, I'm not going to speak for long, but I think from what Dennis has said, there really is so much hope in this room. We're not only theorists, we are people who live in society. There are people around us who we can reach out to in our everyday lives. We don't have to talk about the heavy aspects of monetary reform in its theory. We can really talk about things and seek opportunities to talk about things which relate it to everybody else's life. The speaker that Dennis was talking about around 2 o'clock this afternoon challenged my opinion in some way, because he said that we'll always have to come up against conflict. And being a peaceful girl and a bit of a hippie, I don't think that that's really what I want to focus on. So I was thinking about, we have to really seek the opportunities in our own lives to find that opening where we can connect with another person, we can connect with another community. I had a wonderful happening a couple of days ago. I did a peace walk across North Ohio, just 53 miles. But the night before my final leg, I went to a hip-hop awards ceremony who was invited by a chap who'd found out about my peace walk and invited me there to promote it the night before, to invite people to come on the last leg. The next day, I had another 10 people join me on this peace walk. They provided music, they provided the sound system, they provided everything that I hadn't had, and they were from a completely new community to that I'm normally part of. Beyond that, when there was this chap met me where I wanted to set up this sound system, I was with a Japanese journalist who was taking photographs and talking to me for an hour or so. And he said, talk to this man, just stand there and talk to this man. So I started talking about monetary reform, as you do. And this man was wearing his big baggy jeans and, they're hanging around his bottom and all his shirt was hanging out, his big cap. And I hugged him and his cap fell off, and I did it twice through the day. His cap kept falling off. Anyway, cut a long story short, I started talking to him about monetary reform. And this man said, oh, I know, I was a mortgage broker. I know how money was created. This is really what we need the African-American community to know about. I want to write some music with you. I want to do a film. I want you to come to my church and talk about this. This is incredible. I'm doing a flaky peace walk. I'm talking about something which is very dear to me and very dear to what I think is America as well. But I'm finding an avenue here for monetary reform in a community and a constituency that I wouldn't have automatically have thought would have been appropriate or open to my ideas. And now this whole world has opened up to me, this whole community that really needs to know about this, because they really are becoming the slaves to this system. And I invite you to find that opportunity in your own lives, to reach out to people who you wouldn't normally do, to talk to people on their level and bring them along with you. As part of this peace walk, and I'm not going to talk for long, but as part of this peace walk, the night before, that same evening actually, of meeting these hip-hop people, I was invited on a radio show. And it was a radio show which was of libertarians. And I was really nervous because it was my first one on my own without Dennis. And I was like, oh God, I don't want them to beat me up. Oh my goodness, what are they going to say? And the gentleman who introduced me to them said, well, go there but be cautious. Oh no. I was so nervous when I walked down there. I thought, no, I'm not going to embrace the idea of conflict. I know that where our differences are, but that's not a problem. I was walking on the United Nations International Day of Peace. They don't like the UN. I want to talk about the issuing of currency, maybe increasing the power of government a bit. They want to do it a different way. But I started talking to them, and we won each other over, and we had the most fantastic conversation. Instead of being on there for 5 minutes, I was on for the rest of the 45 minutes of the show, and we were talking about this. So again, I invite you to embrace what you can reach and meet in other people, and move with that. Rather than fight resistance because you're going to just create heat and friction, really move with whatever it is that you can move with. Find the humanity, find the soul, find the social situation, whatever it will be, and go for it. Because I know we really can change the world. When I was 18 and I first became aware of monetary reform through Peter Challen, through Ken Palmerton, I'm so pleased you're here, Ken, I really am. Who would have dreamt that following my intuition and following my love and inspiration of this subject, that meeting Stephen at the House of Lords and following my intuition of coming out to America, giving up a good job in London and coming to be his volunteer for 6 months, in the second week I would meet Dennis, and here we are. Yeah, things really do move. We're not talking about incremental change, we're talking about a transformational shift that we can all be part of, and we are all part of, and everybody in this room is doing it and has the ability to do even more of it. So with that, I'm going to say good night, and God bless you, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dennis and Elizabeth, and it's very inspiring, and we're looking forward to working with both of you for the coming years and achieving great things. And I think at this point, again, I want to thank all of you for your attention and for your help in making this happen. We have another half day tomorrow, and we'll discuss tomorrow the American Monetary Act in more detail. We'll discuss the Monetary Transparency Act that we had a working group together with earlier today with Congressman Kucinich, and that's looking good. So things are opening up. There are possibilities that are going to happen, and so when I hear I'll use the word negative. When I hear negative appraisals that, oh, you can't change this, it won't work, nothing will change. Again, it's going to be hard to make this change. And when I heard Ed Chambers say it might be 20 years, that doesn't faze me, really. It's going to take whatever time it takes. We'll make it happen as soon as we can. But again, always remember, what we're trying to do is good, really good, for 99.9999% of the people of this country. That's got to mean something. I mean, we have to make sure that people understand that. Well, again, thank you, and that's it. Good night.